All right, it looks like John W. stepped out for a minute. We have Tressa. Good morning, Tressa. I have 9:29 by my clock, so let's just give it one more minute and then we'll get started.
We are live on YouTube, so whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you. I was just going to give folks one more minute till we hit 9:30 and to give John W. a chance to come back, and hopefully Judith will join us too. All right, well, hey, I got 9:30, so let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 2023 meeting of the St. Mary's County Library Board of Trustees. My name is Michael Dunn. I'm the president of the library. It's great to see your smiling faces again after missing everyone last month. And I appreciate folks making arrangements for us to be on Zoom. And I look forward to returning in person next month. We do have a quorum. I see 5 trustees here, which is great. Hopefully more will join us. So to begin, why don't we go around and just do some introductions of our trustees? Why don't we go alphabetically by last name? So I think Sharon, can I pass it over to you first?
Sure, I'm Sharon Fitzsimmons, board member, trustee.
And I'm John Johnston, trustee vice president.
Tressa Setlack, trustee treasurer.
Dorothy Waters, trustee.
All right, thank you, everybody. Our first item of business, we have a request to address the Library Board of Trustees by Mr. Chris Peabody. I want to note first, I'll just share this information from our agenda that the public may attend our meetings and can ask ahead of time if they wish to speak. They can email our director, Michael Blackwell, to do so. People who wish to address the board can ask beforehand and plan to come to the Leonardtown Library to address our group. The public can view our meetings remotely over our library YouTube channel. Mr. Peabody, before I turn it over to you for 3 minutes, let me give our trustee Judith Gwynn a chance to introduce herself if she's able to do so. Judith, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you thank you.
Sure, Judith Gwynn. I've been on the board since January of this year. Not sure what else you need to know, but I'm very happy to listen to what Mr. Peabody has to say.
Great. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you.
I'm muted. There we go. Mr. Peabody, if you can hear us and if all the audio is working, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chris Peabody. My family and I have lived here in St. Mary's County for the last 16 years. I want to start by thanking the Board of Trustees, first for your volunteer service to our community, and second for allowing me to address the board. I want to thank Mr. Blackwell for his correspondence with me over the last few weeks, explaining the library policies to me, and also for coordinating this time for me to speak. So I'm here this morning to voice my concern with your recent, what I call unwarranted change in the firearms policy. I ask that today the board take action today at this meeting to rescind that recent change you made the weapons policy that removed the exception for citizens with Maryland carry permits. Since you enacted it at the July 14th board, the board and the library has actually been violating the Second Amendment rights of those aforementioned citizens with those carry permits. In accordance with the SCOTUS Bruin ruling last year and current Maryland state law. Civil rights violations and the litigations that come of those aren't something that the library should be involved in. This board's under the executive branch of the government, and you're not empowered to pass laws that affect people's civil rights. Okay, there was no need for the board to change the policy prior to October 1st. On October 1st, there's a new state law that goes into effect, Maryland Senate Bill 1, and it directs what public places, public government buildings, which the library falls under, have to do. And it's display a clear and conspicuous sign at the main entrance of the building indicating it's not permissible to wear, carry, or transport a firearm in that building. That state law is being challenged by numerous plaintiffs. Maryland Shall Issue, of which I'm a member, is one of those plaintiffs, which makes me then one of those plaintiffs. I heard spoken in one of the 2 meetings in June or July that they were the board was trying to align with other libraries in Maryland. So I went through the 24 county library system web pages in Maryland over the last week. 5, including St. Mary's latest change, have policies that prohibit lawful weapon carry. Just 5 of the 24. Right? With the Bruin ruling, you have to have historical analogies. There are no historical analogies during the historical time period identified in the Bruin ruling, where libraries were listed as sensitive places. We don't have any police at the library. We don't have any armed security at the library. We have no metal detectors. We have no way to deny entry to anyone and no way to protect people when they're at the library. Firearm laws at the state and federal level are incredibly nuanced. I encourage the board in the future, when you have legal discussions about civil rights, have your legal counsel here with you so you can have that back and forth discussion. Firearms are heavily regulated, civil rights are heavily regulated. It's a sticky area. The discussions I heard in the June and July meetings on the topic of firearms, they were filled with a great deal of conjecture, some misinformation, and sometimes appeared to have more emotion than fact in it. Thank you for allowing me to come today and express my concerns to you.
Mr. Peabody, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your efforts and the thoughtful way you presented your perspective, and we will certainly take that into consideration. Let me ask my colleagues on the board if anybody would like to make a comment or speak at all. And can I ask if folks can also raise their hand to help me sort of visually see who would like to speak, if anybody. Judith?
Mr. Peabody, could you clarify? You cited a number of 5 out of 24, and I didn't hear everything you said. Could you go back to that?
Only 5 of the 24 have policies listed somewhere in their website that say legal firearm carry is prohibited. I.e. the Maryland, if you were having a Maryland carry permit, only 5 of the 24 library systems, to include St. Mary's, prohibit that. So 5 of those are today violating the civil rights of folks with a Maryland carry permit.
Okay, thank you.
John W., do you wish to speak? Okay. All right. Mr. Peabody, again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Mr. Biden. Thank you. Again, I thank you for your service to the community. All of you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
I do not have any policy changes ready today, but I will go back for next month's meeting. And we did consult with our attorney over this, and I was at the district court yesterday in conjunction with a library business. If you go to any school or hospital, you're going to see the same signs. Libraries come under the education code in Maryland, and if you go to any school, you will see they also have similar signs up. I do not think that we are in violation of any laws. I know that not everyone's going to like this policy, but remember that we did say if come the implementation of the governor's new law, Maryland's new law, voted on by a vast majority of people, if that does not stand, we'll change our policy again. So I think if you wish me to come back with anything next month, I will, but for now, may we please move forward? Yes.
Would we consider potentially putting this into effect in October? I'm hesitant to say that because I know one of the major impetuses was concerns of librarians dealing with problems right now, but I didn't know if that might help in some of the legal questions if it went into effect at the same time as the new law.
In order to do that, you would need to, and I believe you could now, you would need to put the policy aside because it's already in place. So you can't just say, oh, let's not do it because you've already enacted it. So that would be something that you could consider doing. I do think it's the right policy, and And I do think that it makes us in line with the schools in St. Mary's County, as well as something like the hospital or a district court.
All right. Are we, John W., please?
For Michael Blackwell, the legal consult you did, was that with Jamie Sterling?
No, it was with our attorney, our library attorney.
The one who's the HR expert?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on in the agenda here. The next item of business is approval of the July 2023 minutes. Have folks had the chance to take a look at those? Any discussion, or we can entertain a motion to approve them?
I will move to approve.
I will second.
All right, all in favor, if you could say aye and raise your hand again to help with the counting, that'd be great. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Okay. Next, we have approval of the monthly expense ledger and the EALs. Many thanks to Belinda for interrupting her vacation to deal with the formatting so that we could have the full picture. Thank you, Belinda, for doing that. Any discussion of those? John W.
On page 2 of 4 at the top, I see Lexi Trash, $1,168 and change. Is that a monthly or is that a quarterly billing or what?
One moment, please, while I find it. Bill, at the top, I see Waste Management of Maryland. Is
Correct?
that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Let's certainly not monthly. I'm going to believe that it's quarterly, but I will verify that for you.
All right. On that same topic, but tangentially, how often do we rebid things like that? I mean, even if quarterly, that's a pretty hefty amount. Annually.
That's an annual bill, or if it's quarterly. Amy Ford, who is on the call.
I'm on the call, Michael. This is Belinda.
Oh, hi, Belinda. Do you know if that's is the waste
We're talking Lexi, right?
Yes.
Lexi is a monthly bill,
Monthly bill,
and
okay.
there aren't a lot of options for trash in the St. Mary's County. There's really only one. And they did increase their prices, and we kind of talked about that a couple months ago when we, I believe at the meeting, but I know, Michael, I showed you that letter that they said they were increasing their prices,
Right.
and that St. Mary's County negotiated at a lower increase than the rest of the county.
Are we tied to them then as a vendor because of a county negotiation?
No, we could go out on our own. The trouble is that there's just very few options here.
Well, there's more than one. I've got 3 different companies come through my neighborhood.
We can look and see if there's anybody else who would take the contract. We don't have to use them, no.
I think we ought to look into it. I mean, something that if this is a monthly bill, that's 12 grand a year for picking up our trash. There's got to be better options than that.
Well, John, just so you know, all the trash companies went up this year. And because we are tied sort of with St. Mary's County, they were able to negotiate a lower increase with this company. We can look, but we do have a lot of trash. And it includes the recycling portion of it. So that's just the information I have on that.
Well, on an even Steven basis, in other words, apples to apples, I think we ought to look at as many comparable, as many companies in the county on a comparable basis for what we're doing with waste management, just to see how the money stacks up.
Well, this is the best we can do with this company, but we can look into other companies and see if there are any who will even take the contract.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Yes, Sharon.
So as I was looking forward, I didn't see trash for the other branches, but I see 2 for Lexi for this month.
So the reason there are 2 is because I get them at the kind of at the end or very beginning of a month, and July was the first month of the year, so I didn't pay July's until July 1st or shortly after, but I paid August probably at the end of July. And as far as the others, again, Leonardtown is done quarterly through the county or through the county, and Hall is actually a bill to Smyrla.
Thank you.
Also, go ahead.
Let's go to John Jay and then Judith.
All right. I saw a listing for a company called Orange Boy. And from what I could find, I think that that might be the same company that does data analytics for libraries and other philanthropy groups. What specific services are we getting from them?
That is correct. They do our library analytics. They also provide our email platform, and they create surveys for us. So for example, customer surveys or employee surveys. And we will be using them when we go through the strategic planning process that's coming up to help create surveys. And thank you, Sharon, for your chat comment. Yes, they allow us, for example, to create heat maps. We can see where all of our users are, where the greatest circulation is coming from. So they allow us to do our analytics.
Yeah, thank you. I thought the name sounded familiar.
Yeah, and that's an annual fee.
Judith?
Oh, to beat on the trash issue again. Evergreen. Evergreen is like a significantly less to almost everybody, but just so you know, they do have reliability issues. They also get complaints about missing days, but it might be worth looking into.
Thank you.
Are we ready to entertain a motion to approve the EALs?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? Okay. All right, moving along on the agenda, let's head over to Tressa for the treasurer's report.
I submitted my July report in July, even though I wasn't able to attend. My report should have been with the packet, so I don't have anything.
All right, so thank you, Tressa. Keeping us moving. Then let's move over to John Jay for the Smyrla report.
All right. And we just met remotely this past Tuesday, and we looked at a study of the regional delivery system for materials, and we'll be making probably a decision at the September meeting, yes, as to which options to go with. And we approved new investment policies for the 403B plan and the RHRA plan. We officially joined the network for Milo/Marina for the interlibrary loan. So the drop off and pickup point at the Fairview Library is now operational. So no longer using UPS. And I don't remember whether we, at the previous meeting of this board, whether we looked at the regional hotspot survey for the Southern Illinois libraries. But one thing that stood out for me was that 45% of the hotspot users say that the reason is the high cost of broadband. And then in September, Smyrla is going to be holding a staff day. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. That's really helpful. I have a question. 2 meetings ago in June, we had talked about trying to identify another member from our board who would join Smyrla, and we hope to kind of pin that down by the July meeting. I don't know, I don't think that conversation got picked up, right? So do we still need a board member from our group to join Smyrla?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Any takers?
Judith.
Not everybody at once.
There it is. She put her hand up.
Judith, thank you, Judith.
Soul of the American.
I want a pay raise for this.
Thank you very
Double
much,
what you're
Judith. We
getting
really
now.
appreciate it.
We will double your current salary.
Yeah, Judith, do you have the application that I shared that would go to Ashley Teagle?
Did you send it by email?
I believe so.
I'll
and I
look
can-
for it. If I don't find it, I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
Let me turn it over to Michael for the celebrations.
I don't have any this month. On a monthly basis, put out a call to our managers and say, please recommend people to be so honored. And then I didn't get any this month, but we will continue next month and have more. So we'll move right into the fiscal year 23 budget review. That's last fiscal year, not the one we are currently in. And you do have that budget report, and it is coming to you primarily now because what happens in many cases in July is that although that fiscal year closed at the end of June, we're still getting in bills that date from services from that time. So if you look, you'll see areas, and those will be in brackets where we had a surplus. Not as much money was used as was budgeted. In other areas, you will see that expenses were greater in those areas than was forecast. And you get a line-by-line breakdown of where we have to make adjustments to basically bring the budget to neutral so that the debits and credits are balanced out. And later today, I will ask you to please approve those budget line transfers. But for now, you can basically see where we had more things sort of a surplus or where there was a debit. So for example, under telephones, utilities, whatnot, it was more expensive than we had forecast by $10,000. Under the health insurance, it came out $48,000 less than we had budgeted for. And we do, for this current year's budget, look at those and try to make sure that we're doing the best adjustments that we possibly can. So we also gave you, and Belinda, thank you so much. Belinda worked this out with our accountants. And so unlike with the sort of end of year statement you're going to get from the auditors, this does not include things like depreciation. This is actual what came in, what went out. And so we've broken out some things that are restricted, and those are FOL and donations. Those are not considered part of the operating budget per se. So you can see the county funding, the state funding, which was basically 4.191 million, a little bit of other income, our services, that's our photocopying, things like that.
Michael, what page are you on?
I'm on page 1 of the profit and loss statement,
Oh.
which was in your packet.
Yes. This one.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is what, as I say, this is what came in and what went out, what our income is and what our expenses for the year were. So our services, that's things like photocopying, our fine is 32,000. And I think we're getting to the point on that where we may go to the county and ask if we can go fine free next fiscal year. It does bring in 32,000, and we've been loath to go completely fine free, although nobody under the age of 18 owes fines to the library by Maryland state law. So you see that the total income there is 4.269 million, or and then we have the additional restricted income, which we call it restricted because it cannot be used for every purpose. By MOU with the Friends of the Library, for example, there are 4 things that money can be used for. The collection, materials, that would be, it can be used for staff support and education. It can be used for building enhancements, but it cannot be used for example, I don't know, paying for recycling. There are limited things it can do. Same thing with the foundation. So we've set that aside just a little bit here. We also got some grant income. The thing about the grant income is that we get the grants and we spend them. It's in and it's out. There's no like surplus that comes from a grant. So for example, that Simply E grant, it was originally for $40,000, but we didn't spend it all. So it's not like we got the additional amount. All grants are matched in and out. So there's no surplus there. If you see our total profit for the year of $4.531 million, and we got some interest from the MLGIP account. Basically, if you look to the right there, you'll see a figure where it says other income. You'll see a figure that says $4,406,644.45. That is what we brought in minus the grants.
Is everybody following?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay.
Just checking in to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, yeah. Then you start seeing our expenses in all the different areas. And that is all the expenses for the year.
Sorry.
So our total expenses are $4,296,936.94.
I got that.
Okay, so look on the very last page. You'll see that with the donations, the FOL, and with all the grant expenses, that our total expenses were $4,512,466.07. So it looks like we have a surplus of $40,000, but in fact we don't, because $45,720.87 are restricted. It is in our account, but it cannot be used for everything. So if you take out that, we spent $5,277.44 more than we took in last fiscal year. So there was no budget surplus for fiscal year 23. We dipped into our rainy day fund that much.
By 5,000.
By 5,000, yeah. We also list the board income here, which in the audit gets included in the library's income. Again, that looks like it's money that's sitting there that we have. It's not our money at the library, it's the board money.
You mean the fund balance when you say the rainy day fund?
No, I mean that Vanguard, that OPEB and Vanguard income, that Vanguard income that is interest and dividends, that sort of thing. That's not money that we have here at the library.
No, when you said you dipped into the rainy day fund
Oh,
for
yes, exactly.
$5,000.
We dipped into, we spent that much more than we took in. So basically that means we dipped into the rainy day fund balance that much.
The fund balance, okay.
Yeah. So that pretty much closes out fiscal year 23, other than having you vote eventually on, and we'll look at that shortly, on the in the action portion of our meeting today. Questions on that one?
Well, you had talked about our income and our outflow balancing. So we know what the commissioners approved. And we know what the trustees have approved on a line-by-line basis. So theoretically, would those two numbers not be the same in total?
Michael, may I answer that?
Please do.
John, we actually have a use of fund balance for the fiscal year of 2023 of $62,000, and we only used $5,000. So that is why we have more spent than income, because we had anticipated using $62,000 of that fund balance, and we only used $5,000.
So
we are still within our budget.
Yeah, we did not dip into the fund balance as much as we say. And at the start of the year, we say, well, here's what we think it's going to take from the fund balance. This year, it did not take all that. It did take 5,000.
I keep coming back to the fact that we don't really seem to engage in what did Jimmy Carter call it? Zero balance budget preparation. I mean, if we know what we're getting from the commissioners, to me, that's what we ought to build our budget on. Anything after that, for example, grant money helping us out, we have no control over that. But we can move money around inside of what we have approved. And that's the part that I think ought to total up to what the commissioners gave us, not this, I'm going to call it off the books bank balance.
As Sharon has noted in the chat, we cannot control many expenses. So for example, utilities were far more than we anticipated. So we're within the allotted budget from, it's not only the state, it's not only the commissioners, it's the state, it's our fines, it's our services. It's all that amount. We are basically pretty close to within what we were given, what we made for the year. We're $5,000 in the hole.
Well, I'm just looking at it from a household standpoint. If I over budget or my car insurance get raised, I'm going out to eat one less time a week with my wife. I mean, that's just the way it is.
John, when we present to the county commissioners, we actually include that fund balance information in the request to the county. They actually ask us to tell them how much of our fund balance we're going to try to, or we think we're going to use. That's actually part of our budget request, is how much of our fund balance will be part of our budget. So
It's on
again,
page
it's
6
still,
of the budget report.
it's all still part of what we request from the county. So that's all still part of our county request.
Let's go to Sharon and then Judith.
So one thing that makes this a little bit different from a budget at your own house is that there aren't really a slush fund of things that we do that are fun things that we can cut out. There are some that we can cut back on, but there aren't, it's not like we have now we're not going to go out to eat place in the budget. And the fact that they spent $6,000, that's right about how much was extra in the utilities.
Actually, the utilities were kind of far more than that, but we've got two budget lines that we can do something with. One is salaries and the other is materials. So we could buy a little bit less books or ebooks. I'm not going to do it. Or we could not hire as many people and staff the library. We're already bare bones staff. There is no give in this budget. And we only spent a little bit of $5,000, over 5 million. What percentage is that?
Well, and the other piece of it is because when you're thinking like a business, when you cut back on services, you then may not get the same budget allotted to you next year because you're not serving as many people. You're not able to do those things. So pulling 5,000 or 6,000 out of these savings in order to be able to do what we did this last year to allow the commissioners to say, yes, we will give you more money. I think that was a reasonable investment for the return that we got from the commissioners.
Judith.
I think I recall maybe April or May, the director came to us with a $50,000 request for books for the mobile library from the fund balance, if I remember that correctly. So my question is, every time, Michael, when you draw to the fund balance, is there always a vote by the board? Hey, we need to take money out of the fund balance. So in like notifying us that you're using it.
Well, if it's a specific request, yes, we will ask that. In this case, it was $62,000 budgeted to already come out of that. You already approved that when you approved this budget. You approved using $62,000 to balance the budget. We only used 5, so it's actually pretty darn good news.
Right, but specifically, you asked for the money for the books. Was that just because it was a significant amount of money and it wasn't in the budget then when it was prepared
Yes,
a year ago?
that is correct.
Okay. So
But
anything
didn't we
not
get-
planned for,
But
budget-wise, if it wasn't planned
Hold
for, you're under the board.
no,
Yes,
that was
Judith.
that was not part of the original budget. However, let me get this form back out here. If you look on page 3 of this, you will see mobile library services. That amount there is $55,000. That was that fund balance amount. So really, we didn't use that money out of the fund balance. The amount coming out of the fund balance for everything we spent last year is $5,000. So that did not really debit the fund balance at all. But we yes.
What as of the latest statement is the balance in that account?
Well, as we told you before, that number goes up and down. And may I please give you next month the amount that it was at the end of August. And I can, rather than say it's roughly this, I will give you an exact number.
Well, my checkbook goes up and down too, but I know how much money I've got in there.
John, no one's saying that we don't know the money. We just need to,
I would like to give
peppering
you
a lot of
exact figure
questions
rather
right
than
now.
say it's roughly this.
Well, roughly,
Michael,
Yes.
Michael, if you remember, I updated the FY24 budget. It's on there. Last page.
Oh, okay. Oh, we'll look at that in a second then. We have.
And Judith, sorry.
Belinda, please go ahead,
I
Belinda.
can give it to you in a couple minutes as of the end of as the very start of the fiscal year.
Michael, please let Belinda continue.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Michael. I just wanted to clarify with Judith, just so you know, when that money that we did request, I think I wanted to clarify that from the fund balance, it's because it was not budgeted. And so we did not know if we would have the funds to pay it. However, we were able to pull those funds from other line items. And that is why we did not actually dip into the fund balance for those funds that you did approve.
Okay, that clarifies, that helps. And I think that's helpful if you come back to us and say, we asked for 50,000, you gave it to us, but in fact, we didn't need it. Because in my mind, that happened.
And I agree. And that is actually what this profit and loss statement was supposed to inform you of.
That's fine.
So that is what.
Here's the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I did not know for sure until I completed this fiscal year budget.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you. That really clarifies it. Thanks, Belinda.
Judith, thank you for getting us there with those questions. That was good. Can we move on to the FY24 budget? I feel like we're kind of naturally in that direction.
Okay. We have broken out a few more things for you in the budget, and you will be able to see what a fund balance was at the start of the fiscal year when we're done here. Okay. So if we take a look at page 1, you'll see expenses so far this year with only 8% of the year gone. And what so far the salaries have been, the health insurance has been And there really aren't a lot of expenses, because, you know, this was very little of the year gone by so far. So looking at it, I don't see much that I feel like, you know, we're getting anything problematic on digital service contracts might front load, which is why 57% would be there. Program services up at 20, but that's budgeted throughout the year. So I guess what I'd like to take a look at is on page 5. What the you'll see restricted expenses have now been broken out, and the amounts on hand have been kind of broken out there. And we are incidentally going to be asking the Friends to give us the check that they typically give us in May in July instead, so that it will be a part of the next fiscal year. I mean, of course, we're intensely grateful for all the support they give, but if we get a $60,000 check from them in May, expending it by the end of June, especially since it comes in mid-May, is often problematic. So we're going to make that sort of thing part of the next year's fiscal budget, and the aim is to expend all restricted funds received during the year by the end of next June. So we are breaking out our budgeted expenses and our restricted expenses there, with donations and that sort of thing being restricted. Page 6, you can see our grand total of unrestricted revenue, what we are thinking we're going to get in for the year. So you see on page 7 more of our income. On page 8, you see the OPEB and Vanguard income will be listed. So, and as of the preparation for this budget, we hadn't received money from the state and the county yet. So you see not a lot of income so far. Grants are broken out separately on page 9. What we're thinking we're going to get, staff development, a local arts council grant, state library van grant of $21,000 additional. I'm pleased to announce that we should be getting another $6,000 there. And I haven't seen that money from the state yet, but we're told that we're going to get an additional $6,000, just like we got this additional $21,000. Our strategic plan grant, the ebook grant, the state memory lab grant are all things that we have this year so far. Over on page 10, you'll see our donations are all broken out now, and we're just trying to give you the total financial picture here. And at the bottom, you see this is new for you, fund balance, and this amount will change, but it's as of the beginning of this fiscal year. So currently, of the total fund balance available, it's $659,000. Call that our rainy day fund. However, if you take out the restricted amounts that have to be put towards a specific thing from the FOL, from the foundation, and I go to them every time we do an expense from the foundation, for example, and say, may I please spend this money? $571,023 is basically what our fund balance is.
On Zoom.
So that's what we think right now we've got.
Sharon.
Our monthly expenses,
Oh, hold on, Michael. Sharon has a question.
okay,
So I might have missed it. I'm sorry. I was looking at multiple things in this folder, but the total fund balance available on page 10 then says expensed in current fiscal year. Can you describe again what that means, please?
Michael, I can take that. Basically, it means any money that we're taking from those accounts. So it's going to be all of the expenses up above. So every time we do an expense, we're taking money from these accounts, and it will show it in there eventually.
So is that the same as saying that this budget is $300,000 over what the commissioners plus Friends of the Library, all of those things?
these are
No.
PNC Treasury, PNC Analysis, and MLGIP. Those are all our accounts. Well, look at the kitty. Hi, kitty.
It's just, this is separate. I mean, this is the money that we're spending, but these are our accounts. These is what the account looks like. Not necessarily tied in with, I mean, it is tied in because we spend this money up above, but this is just what I'm going to see on the account. Money coming in, money going out.
Got it. Thank you.
And I note on the FY24 budget on page 6, it looks to me that we're anticipating a use of fund balance of $75,600.
That would be for the full year. That's what we are anticipating needing to balance this budget that you've approved. But as you just saw from fiscal year 23, you may not use that amount.
Right.
Or it could be if something really major happens, we might have to use more.
Okay. Okay.
If there's an unexpected expense, you would be asked to approve that upfront. Yes, John.
If the 75,000 as budgeted is good, then on page 10, total fund balance available, we would, if we used all that, we would go down to a little under 500,000.
No, that's built in.
That's built in.
That's what we think. Yeah, that's already built in. That's what we think is available now. If you want to look at our monthly expenses, which you will see on page 5, we're anticipating spending $416,000 a month. So
yes, John, if we spent the $75,000 today, then yes, that available fund balance would go down by $75,000 if we were to spend it today.
If you were to spend it today.
as it is, it's built into the budget. But yes, so our monthly expenses are $416,000 with your available fund balance of $571. We've got a little over a month of fund balance to cover that, and it's typically requested that, it's just as a general practice, 2 months fund balance is a good idea. We certainly don't have that.
Going back, if I may, to that portion of this report, which shows the Vanguard funds, we've been looking at that as not being ours for over 2 years now. When are we going to offload that to the foundation?
As soon as a good way to do that is discovered. You'll recall that we haven't yet found a way to do that.
Michael, I've given you 2 or 3 ways to do that, and
But
nothing's
it's not
happened.
mine to do.
Any comments from anybody?
Yeah, I mean, that's our responsibility as a board. It's not the library's money, it's the board's money.
And, a couple of the ways you suggested simply aren't working, you tried to set up I think you were looking at Edward Jones, I'm sorry, that was the OPEB, never mind. It's not mine to do. I don't write the checks. I don't run the foundation. So I can't be the one who initiates that.
Well, two comments on this at that point. Michael Dunn, I think we need to get the foundation energized to be able to change or open an account in the foundation's name so those things can finally be removed from the library's books and go back to where everybody historically thinks they should have been in the first place, except that we didn't have a foundation in the first place. Can we effect that before the end of the year, do you think?
Well, John, thank you for your suggestion, right? We've been talking about this for a very long time. There are so many hours of the day, and that has not been the top priority at the bottom line, right? We've been working on other things, trying to keep the foundation afloat, work on fundraising projects. You know, I don't disagree with a word you're saying. It just has not been the top priority, so it hasn't happened.
All right, let me make another point then. We were making good progress with Edward Jones until our lawyer got involved in the thing and misstated what we were trying to do.
No, our understanding from you is that Edward Jones says they looked at Maryland law and said they couldn't serve the OPEB.
They looked at Maryland law for banking, and that's not what we're trying to do. Our lawyer weighed in. He sent me the law they were looked at that was being questioned, and it had nothing to do with this.
Tressa, please go ahead, Tressa.
We're not even talking about OPEB right now. This is the Vanguard account. It's nothing to do with OPEB. And moving those funds really has been an issue, and it has to do with the foundation, and they have other priorities that they're working on right now. But Edward Jones has absolutely nothing to do with what we were discussing.
Only in the context of they were a possible solution for what we are now discussing.
But they're
and
not.
It got derailed by our lawyer.
And they're not a possible solution for this.
I don't think that Edward Jones had anything to do with the foundation, with this money. This was something completely different. That's the OPEB money.
They could have done
Correct. That's what I just said. This has nothing to do with that.
So,
all right, I think let us move forward with the agenda. I don't think this is a constructive conversation right now.
FYI for you, I have somebody who would like to give the library some stock. The foundation has said they are not interested in opening an account that will allow that. So I have put an email out asking our accountant, is there some way the library could have such an account? So that may become something that can happen in the future, but right now we've just never, no good way of doing this has ever been put forward.
This is a question for Michael Dunn then. Does that statement accurately reflect the foundation that they have no interest in being able to accept donations of securities?
I'm going to move the conversation forward because we are kind of straying from what we are doing here today. John, we have a foundation meeting coming up, I think this week. You are welcome to come if you would like to, but now is not the time for this conversation. We have a lot to talk about today.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Moving on to the mobile library update. As I shared with you via email, that is being constructed. We were hoping to hear and tell you today that it's on its way to Maryland, but we don't have an email yet from the vendor on the Eastern Shore. But by the end of this month, that vehicle will be in Maryland. Which is obviously great news. You did ask for a listing of all the mobile library expenses, and that's in your packet, but that's not new information. So we are hoping that the vendor in Maryland will have it finished fairly quickly. We don't know if we'll have the wrap on in time to participate in the Veterans Day parade here in St. Mary's County, but that's our goal. But definitely by the end of the year, the mobile library is going to be on the road. It's taken a long time, but we're just thrilled that it finally is going to be happening. questions on that one?
Yes, I believe there was from someone a request for the contract with those folks. Have we gotten that yet? We have the expenses.
Why do you want to see it when you've already seen it before? I'm just asking this question because it seems to me that the reason for asking for the contract, is this on its way? It's on its way.
I haven't seen the contract.
All right, I will send it to you.
I don't think Sharon has. Or
Okay,
anybody
well,
listening.
it was something that the board approved, working with this company, so I will send you the contract and you can see it, when we're done today.
I also had a question, and I can't find it now, but I thought I saw the wrap being referred to as first payment. Did anybody else see that?
There's a deposit at the bottom of the first page.
Bottom of the first page. Yep, maybe my first page is not the same as yours.
There were 2 payments for the wrap. There was one to the artist and one to the company Barefoot Graphics that will actually be doing the wrap itself. We did put first payment on there because there is a chance that there may be some additional once they get the truck. But there may not be.
Right. We got a quote from them, from the application company, but without the exact measurements and where all the door handles and awning and all of that would be, it could affect the price somewhat. And so as soon as the truck is delivered to Tech Ops, we can give them the exact measurements and they'll be able to update if there's any additional cost or refund us if that happens. That's not likely. They're very, very good at doing wraps and they don't anticipate a lot of changes, but it is possible that there will be a one more small charge for application of the wrap.
So technically that's an open-ended cost right now.
Correct. The artwork is all paid for, but the application could have another small charge, but it would not be very significant.
All right, well, I'll get that contract to you and you can see it after today's meeting. One quick news before 10:30 when we're supposed to be joined by Asset Strategy, our consultants there, and that is that our attorney has taken a job in Frederick County, Maryland, and will not be, other than looking at the changes in our personnel manual, which will all be very much in his area of expertise. We will not have an attorney. I've reached out to one firm which lists employment law as a specialty, and I will let you know what they have to say about possibly taking the library on.
Before Asset Strategy arrives, I want to spend a few minutes here so that Judith and John W., if we want to kind of report back about our conversation with them earlier this week or some of the key takeaways before they come to kind of walk through the quarterly report. Any thoughts?
Actually, I didn't get a chance to ask about the van. So I think we were all disappointed to learn last month that there was another delay in delivery, and it's a little bit alarming. So I went back and did a little research on the deliverable dates. I think we went out with in May or June of 21 with the RFP and the award of the contract and funding. The first date deliverable was February 22nd. We were told April of 22, we get the van. Then in April of that year, when it was due, we were told October of 22. Then in October, we were told the van would come in December. In November that year, anticipating the van, 2 staff were authorized, and by December of 22, we had 2 staff on board to run the van. So they've already been on board for 9 months without a van. The van delivery in November was told we'd have it in April.
And are doing
Michael, let Judith finish, please.
In January of 23, we were told we'd have the van in June. In April of this year, we were told we'd have it in July. In July, we told them we're now looking at November. So to hear you say, anybody say, it's on its way, don't worry about it, is really not a satisfactory answer. So the whole thing with deliverables and dates, and I'm not sure how these communications are happening, if they should be shared with the board, if these are official communications, if there's amendments to the contract. But it is concerning these long delays and being told basically every 3 months, it'll be here in 3 months. I don't know where to go with that. It's no longer has credibility with me. Secondly, the fact that we paid in advance over $400,000 and we don't have so much as a tire is also concerning. What is our recourse if the van doesn't work out, if we need a refund? And at what point do we draw the line? At what point, if we're sitting here in 6 months and we hear again, the van is coming in 3 months, at what point are we going to draw the line? If at all, or maybe we don't want to. But I think that's a discussion that's really important to have. And secondly, I need to know what are the acceptance testing procedures for when the van does arrive. I mean, this is not a case of them handing us the keys and driving away. It's a very expensive vehicle with some very specific custom-made additions to it. So what are our acceptance testing procedures before we accept the van?
John Johnston.
I think in my case, I would like to hear more specifics as to why the delays have been happening. I think, I mean, we hear about supply issues, but that's very general. Without getting really too technical, is there certain parts of the construction that are hinging on other parts being ready or not ready, where it's a cascade, or is it a case where some parts have been completed but others haven't, that don't have to, where one doesn't hinge on the other? I don't think we have those details as far as I know.
The two biggest delays have been with computer chips and computer parts and with aluminum supply. And the firm we deal with is dependent upon a firm in Minnesota completing or building the vehicle. It is a custom vehicle. It's not like you go to the lot and you buy it. So that firm was delayed in construction of the vehicle. I will ask that you please table this conversation until next month. If we haven't heard that the vehicle is in Maryland, then I think you've got more reason for concern. It's very complicated. We can get the money back if necessary legally. Here's our problem if we do. Maybe you ever worked with a lot of grants before. I'll give you a specific example. St. Mary's County, now this is before I got here, got a $750,000 grant from the state to renovate the armory. They then decided we're going to build a new building instead. What did you do with the $750,000? You forfeited it. And if we get this money back, there's no guarantee that they'll say you didn't use this money in the allotted time for what it was to be spent on. Therefore, you forfeit the money, and we're back to square zero. Yes.
I don't disagree with you on that problem, but my question then is, every time we have had one of these delays notified to us, have we in turn informed the grant makers so we're not hanging out there?
Yes, and we did want to spend all the grant funding by the end of last fiscal year, which is why we did the payment ahead of time. We could not put it off any longer, that expense, because the grant period ended.
I think we are in a high risk position here that we have basically paid out an enormous amount of money and we have nothing to show for it. And we brought 2 staff on board and bought $50,000 worth of books. And we don't have anything to show for it. So we've paid everything out and spent money.
The staff-
And I don't know how to answer for that. And I understand how grant funding works. And I also know you can ask for extensions and variances on that. If that was an issue, it's just,
We're not given one.
Hold on, Michael, let Judith finish, please.
this is not the kind of fiscal management I would like to see the library operating under. It puts us at high risk. And the last thing anybody wants for this library is another issue that's going to be difficult or embarrassing for the issue, but it puts us at high risk right now for having paid out and invested in something that we don't have any say or control over. Normally, a contract would have milestones and periodic payments. And again, that's something I feel wasn't here, and you can't redo it, that should have been really thought through very, very carefully with a sum of money this big.
Well, I guess in response to that, I will say, A, the staff were not funded from this grant and are not part of that van expense and are already doing great work, and we're happy to have them. We had one people reply to the RFP. They have an extremely good reputation. They build vehicles for the Army. They build vehicles for the CIA. They're an important Maryland firm. And these are unusual, extremely unusual circumstances, a pandemic, high demand, shortages. I appreciate that this is a difficult concern, but this van is going to get delivered or we will get our money back, one of the two. I hope that it is the former. If we get our money back, we may be at square zero and have staff in no vehicle ever, because we're never going to get another grant opportunity like this.
Well, if they don't have a vehicle, they get let go. I mean, that's just business.
No, sir, we will continue on the outreach that is going on now.
I mean, those employees are already adding value. They're not doing nothing. I think that, look, we're gonna, Trustee, you want to go ahead?
I don't want to be disagreeable, but I don't think that we're at risk right now. I think that this company is well respected. The board at the time, we did due diligence in looking at this. There was one response to an RFP. This is not a fly-by-night company, and they've had a difficult time getting supplies. So I don't see that we're at risk. I think that Michael Blackwell and his team have done a great job in managing this and paying for it responsibly, and it's moving forward.
I agree with Tressa, but I do wonder about Judith's question. At what time do we start to, like, at what point do we start to say something is wrong and we need to pursue it?
I think that is a very good question. I think a lot of it depends also on like the information and the communications that we're getting, right? I think to me, the fact that this vehicle is now in Maryland, okay, that's a milestone that has not yet been reached. Like that seems to be legitimate quality progress. I know that I think if we're having this conversation in 3 or 4 months, again, with no progress, I think that will be a cause for alarm from my perspective.
If it helps too, Sandy, the outreach coordinator, and this is Laura, went up to Tech Ops last week to do final selections for all the materials, which they said they were ordering last week. And he did say that if you need to, like, you can go up and see the truck upon delivery. They're very, very open and welcoming. And so if that's something that would allay fears, I'm sure Michael would be totally willing. I know he's offered in the past to take a field trip to the Eastern Shore. But it was very comforting to go because they had received some of the other mobile libraries that have also been significantly delayed in the last week or so. And they did say that ours was the absolute priority. And so they would literally stop work on the ones that they were currently working on to get ours done first. And so they did seem to be extremely responsive and really made Sandy and I, who also, were concerned and want to make sure we get this beautiful mobile library on the road. They really made us feel much more comfortable. They had a VIN number. They're like, it really is coming. We didn't see our van, but we saw one of a similar size, and they really made us feel much better. So that may be an option to help with that, to just go see. It'll just be a shell at this point, but it will at least be a real vehicle.
Laura, next time you go, if you could just chain yourself to the vehicle, that would be great.
Don't come home without it, huh?
Exactly, exactly.
So did you discuss with them acceptance testing? And that, I think, is a question I had that hasn't been answered yet. Will the truck shell itself go through looking at specs, and does it meet our requirements? And then again, when it's been modified, or what is the plan for acceptance?
So my understanding, Michael may have more information, but based on what we were given at the meeting, it was just Sandy and I, because like I said, it was mostly for picking out like the countertop color, that kind of stuff. But they did say that upon delivery, they do a full inspection of the vehicle to make sure it's all what they were promised. And that then they start to apply all of the inside. So it basically comes, he did stress to us multiple times that the company that we're getting our truck from is the one they consider to be the best company. It comes in a more complete form. So the completion upon delivery is faster than the company that some of the other trucks had to be moved to. They're basically kind of like a Penske truck, like it arrives and then they have to put all of the windows in, all of the doors in, everything, where ours will come with a lot of that already completed at the manufacturer. And so they said when ours comes in, it will need the insulation and walls and decorative, stuff, rails for the bookshelves, that kind of thing. But the holes for the windows and doors and all that kind of stuff will already be done. So he did say they check all of that. They send us any final measurements, making sure everything's exactly where it should be for our designer and for the wrap information, as well as just so that we know. And then they complete their work, and then we get to again inspect it and make sure everything's what we ordered.
So asset strategy, they're in the waiting room and they're available till 11. So I'm wondering if we should pause this conversation, which we can come back to, and pivot to asset strategy. John and Judith, anything we want to say before we bring John and Al in the room?
I think we had a good Zoom meeting on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
It's information gathering at this point. We're trying to understand how the account works and an investment strategy and what they can do for us and what they've been doing for us in the past. So it's just information gathering. And ideally, we'd like to go out and find other similar firms so we can come back to the board and say, here's possibly some options or some recommendations, or we continue with asset strategy, but maybe make some recommendations for some modifications to that. So I think it was helpful to have that hour to sit down in the room. I don't want to give specifics, but it just clarified for us, like the process, our expectations, their expectations. So I don't know if you want to add, John.
One thing we did not have at that point, which came later, was their fee schedule. And if you've done the math, back to the first quarter of this year, the fee for using them has gone up sixfold. I'm not sure that we
And
knew
I think
that
that's
at the
something.
time.
Yeah, I think that's something for comparison when we look at other options. It's certainly a huge piece is fee schedules, as well as investment strategy and proven record.
Sure.
Did you guys talk with them specifically about our questions about the strategy they're using versus Morningstar and commonly accepted criteria?
Yes, we did. So that started with their explanation about how they cast a very wide net. Let's say they're looking for a recommendation in the large company US domestic space, so large cap US, all right? So what they told us was that they go out with all of their databases and they filter for all that, get it narrowed down to a smaller number, and from there, they do a deep dive supposedly into each of those companies they're considering, make appointments to talk with managers, understand their investment strategies, et cetera, et cetera. They flat out said they do not use Morningstar. Well, I didn't say anything, but that's what Morningstar does. That's when I come up with, well, what does Morningstar say about this? Yeah. They give me an answer, but these guys are doing it from a granular standpoint to apparently arrive at the same decision. And so far, they have given us a couple of recommendations that happen not to coincide with what Morningstar's got, okay? Now, one of the questions we had.
John, I
for
think,
them-
John, we need to kind of be brief here so that we can bring them in, I think. But yeah, like John is saying, the key thing, they said they look at manager databases of thousands of managers and their strategies. And when they're thinking about each client, they look at databases to do screens on performance characteristics over long periods of time, return, risks, attributes, et cetera. And they use that tool to filter managers. Then they say they talk with the managers about their process, philosophy, how to run the funds, et cetera. And they gave more detailed information also about, why they chose the Coho fund and all that kind of thing.
Two
But
things very briefly that were important. Number one, we had been ranked with municipal plans, defined benefit plans less than 50 million. If you look at the most recent thing they sent us, we're in an entirely different category now. We
Health
are
and
in
welfare.
healthcare plans less than 50 million. And there was one other thing that and then they posited some unrequested amendments to our investment policy statement.
we'll discuss that after we finish with them. Okay, can we bring in John and Al, please? Our next guest.
Thank you, Johnny.
All right, John, welcome. Al, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Nice to see you both again, and thank you both for your patience.
Sure.
And I know that you are on we got 15 minutes with you. And so we would love to kind of just check in about the quarterly report and, updates and things like that. So the floor is yours.
Very good. And for the sake of time, we're obviously going to take a quick run through, but on page 12 of the quarterly report, do you all have that in front of you, or can you pull up on the screen?
Everybody have it?
So this is the report in the front, executive summary for total portfolio. So this is a very important page. You can see the title up top is compliance. This is where we take your investment policy statement and create a benchmarking system, which we use in our performance monitoring. So example, you come down to the very bottom on the left, you see the large cap down to tips. And this all comes out of the most recent approved investment policy statement, which is back in 2021 in September. So in that IPS, these are the asset classes that are given approval to invest in. Come over to the middle where it says target. So for each asset class, there's a target allocation. We use large cap as our example. You can see it's 27%. To the right, you see range, which is the other important component. So these are upper lower bands. So in large cap, you're in compliance if the valuation, the actual, which I'll talk about in a minute, falls between the low band 17% on the upper band 37%. And the last piece, you can come over to actual. This is the June 30 allocation to large cap, 28.3. As you can see, for the active weight, you're 1.3% overweight and within your boundary. Any questions there? This is again feeds, which you're going to see on the next page, which is a target benchmark for the total portfolio performance. And that benchmark takes the approved asset classes, the approved percentage target, and we assign the appropriate passive index for each asset class. So example, large cap, that would be the S&P 500. So again, this sets a stage on what you're going to see on benchmarking issues on the next page. Let me stop there for any questions, or John, any quick input?
So you're still on page 12, right?
So on page 12.
Okay.
Before I move, I want to just make sure I didn't confuse everybody with all the bouncing around here. If not, let's go to page 13. And here is where we start the analysis of the performance of the total portfolio. Excuse me. And you can see it goes on the left from the most recent quarter out to the inception. And the data we have goes back to 2013. Then you can see the 1, 3, 5, and 7. The other benchmark up top, I'm going to ask John to jump in here for a minute and talk about, as you can see, this is labeled Plan Sponsor Peer Group Analysis. So John, why don't you jump in and talk about this health and welfare and what that does in the report?
Sure. So this is what we refer to as a peer group of other similar types of plans. So a health and welfare plan, which yours is, and so if we look at this, this is our performance reporting service that we use. The consultants who put their clients in and use this performance reporting system identifies them as there's very many categories that they could be in, such as pension plans and endowments and foundations. And so they do have a category as well for health and welfare. And if you look down at the bottom of the tables there, you'll see that the number of plans that are in this peer group ranges by year. How many plans do they have data on that goes back for 3, 5, 7 years in there? So this peer group, there, as Al mentioned, there's a benchmark, which is passive indices, but the peer group are actual other health and welfare funds and what's their performance like over these different time periods, and how does your performance compare to them in terms of peers. And so we're interested in making sure that if you look at the first row there for the total fund, and it has the various time periods of performance, the parenthetical numbers are actually your peer group ranking. So for these time periods, your ranking is very high, and so that's one of the two main components that we're looking at for a total fund return. So Al, I'll turn it back to you on getting back to the target and the rest of the page.
Thanks, John. So we talked about on page 12, the target. So if you look at the total fund, you see right below a target. And that is the index that we create off of the investment policy statement. So you can see for the quarter that returned 3.3. So for the quarter, we outperformed our target, which is the most important because it's aligned to how we are approved to invest, off by 44 basis points. You can work your way out to see a slight underperformance over multiple time periods. Excuse me. The total fund, important to mention, is calculated net of fees, where the target is basically a passive component, so they don't have fees incorporated in there. And any questions on this page where we start looking at the quarter and at the longer time periods? Let me show you two other pages we think are helpful in the analysis. Page 14, we take all the same data, but we look at the last 7 calendar years from 2016 up to 2022. And this provides some insight to how the portfolio has behaved over different market cycles, up market, down markets. And what we had noted, there's 2 time periods where the fund portfolio is below median. Go back to 2018, and these are 2 cycles where we had losses in the market. And you can see the fund was off 4.9%. We did better than our target. It lost 5.2. But we are in the 98th percentile of that peer universe. Same thing holds true for 2022. In the other markets, particularly in strong momentum markets, you can see some very respectable performance. 2016 up in the 7th percentile, 2021 10th, etc. So there's a pattern there of doing well in normalized and up markets and having challenges in down markets. A lot of this is tied to the asset allocation. You can see the target, and that's the asset allocation component, is tracking very closely. And at one of our later meetings, we take a little more time on diagnosing level of volatility in the portfolio. I don't think we have that time today. And then finally on 15 is a page where we want to get away from looking at quarterly, annual, and these are 3-year rolling periods where we can look at longer cycles, look at consistency. We have 5 on here from back starting in 2019 up to this 6/30/23, and 4 of the 5 are above median, which is a nice level of consistency. No surprise, the 6/30/20, which picks up 2018, impacted it, and you can see we're in the 51st percentile, but a little bit below median. So there's a major performance reporting pages. Let me jump to page 18, where we incorporate risk into the analysis. These are called scatter charts, and here we're plotting over 2 different time periods. You can see the 3-year and the 5-year. So let's look at the 3-year. And as you can see on the horizontal, we're looking at risk using standard deviation, and then on the vertical are returns. And we are plotting it on that peer universe. You see the crosshairs where they intersect. You can see all those dots are the 51 other portfolios that make up the peer group. And you can see both our target and the fund are in that upper right. So we've had that higher volatility, which we saw in the performance pages, et cetera, and outperformance for the 3-year time period. Always important to keep an eye on amount of risk being taken in the portfolio. If we want to lower that risk, we get into primarily changing the asset allocation, getting out of some risk assets, going into cash or fixed income. Again, that could be a topic for maybe an ad hoc subcommittee call again to look at that issue. And we're getting close to the end. So let me bring it to page 19. This is if you want an executive summary of performance of both the total portfolio, which you see in the top, and then for each approved asset classes that we saw back on page 12. So there's large cap, SMID, international. And then in each asset class, we have a fund. So let me use large cap as the example. So you have a Schwab ETF broad market. So there's the fund. And below it, you can see the passive index that we use for that asset class. And then we have another peer group. So we have a peer universe of large cap mutual funds. And we can see the Schwab fund for the quarter was in the 36th percentile. So there's a lot of data, and we can look at each asset class, how the asset class do, how the fund do. As we progress, and we have proposed adding, an example, 2 more funds, the large cap, a growth fund and a value fund. If that is approved at some juncture, then we would have 3 funds in large cap. And that gray large cap would then produce a roll-up or composite of the 3 managers in the portfolio. And then each manager would be added, and they would be monitored as we are with the current Schwab US Broad Market ETF. Let me stop again for any questions, or John, anything you might want to throw in before we hit the witching hour here.
No, I'm good with that. Good overview.
Any questions about the quarterly report element here?
I had 2 questions. The first is when you say that the looking at pages 13 and so on, that we're scored against our peers, is that our peers within your company that are managed by your company or outside of your company as well?
That's a good question. The peers are not our clients. The peers are actually the performance reporting system it's a company that does performance reporting on behalf of a large number of institutional investment consultants. So these are consultants that have literally thousands of clients, then their client performance information is fed anonymously into these peer groups that the company maintains. And so, so this is, in essence, the health and welfare plan peer group, and that's what that is.
I know that we are reaching the end of our time. I just want to share that, John W. actually raised a really good question about the investment policy statement that you had returned back to us earlier at the earlier part of this week. And as we are going through our records, and I was looking at the fall 2021 investment policy statement, and Michael Blackwell and I were doing some digging there. And I do have concerns that we have lost the thread a little bit about the current status of what has been approved by the board in the investment policy statement. So I'm going to email you all and ask for your assistance and context and sort of where this document came from that you received. But I would like to, I'm hoping that our board next month can vote on an updated investment policy statement. And I would also like to move towards an up or down vote on those March 2023 recommendations, just so we can pick a direction and have a better sense of where we're going.
Sure.
So that's some work we're going to try to do between now and the next meeting.
And if you need some assistance in terms of history with the investment policy statement, we can check in our files and see what we have on record as well.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you. So
Sure.
We'll talk more about that.
Okay.
Very helpful. And in fact, we can take another couple of minutes. In our proposed recommendations, there's asset allocation changes. So if you go back to page 12 for a minute, I can highlight this pretty quickly. It's a preview of what we're looking for as far as adjustments in the approved asset classes.
Mm-hmm.
We also found in December 21st of 2021, there was a fund in emerging market. You had assets allocated to an ETF. You had allocation to a high yield fund. But you can see the actual. So they've been still in the reporting because these asset classes are still on the approved IPS. So that would be removed. That would resolve those issues. We are recommending taking the tips and fold that up into domestic fixed income, because the managers that we're looking at can hold tips. We're looking for a little more efficiency. We're also looking at the real estate, removing that and folding that into small cap, because the Russell 2000 index for small cap has about close to 7% allocated to real estate. So we've got some ways of reducing the number of asset classes without losing the exposure, because we'll pick them up with the other managers. So there's a quick summary of things that we thought would be accretive to the IPS. And as John said, just let us know.
Sharon asked a good question in the chat. Do those recommendations lower the risk, or are those higher risk?
That's different.
Al, I think my thought is initially that it wouldn't necessarily increase the risk. If anything, it would keep it the same, might lower it slightly. Because
I've got the package here, John, that has the asset allocation with.
Good.
Bear with me. I'll give you a very specific answer, everybody. So the current standard deviation with the lineup is 12.47%. We make those changes, it drops down to 12.13. So de minimis. We're not getting out of the risk assets. We're still going to have 64% in equity, because we view real estate REITs as equity, and there'll still be 36% in fixed income. But the individual asset classes have different risk profiles, so but not anything that dynamically changes the risk profile.
Great. Sharon, is that helpful? Good. All right. Any final thoughts or questions from anybody? Okay. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure. Great to see everyone.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Yeah. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Michael, we should take a 5-minute break at this point, or a break at this point?
Folks, do we want to take a break right now? All right, can we get a motion for a 5-minute break?
Move for 5 minutes.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Okay, a hard 5 minutes. See you in 5. All right, Judith, John, and Dorothy get extra points for honoring our time. Thank you and good job. A grateful board thanks you.
In addition to my raise.
Exactly. You're just raking it in today,
I'm
Judith.
not keeping
Jeez.
your salary now.
Yeah, 0 + 0 is 0, right?
All right. Welcome back, Sharon. Welcome back, John.
I'm
Okay.
misreading it.
So Michael, at this point, do you wish to continue the discussion about the OPEB funds?
Do we need to continue the discussion about the OPEB funds?
Yes, but not in this session.
Okay, so let's move forward then.
No, absolutely. So where we are, just in terms of note taking for minutes, is that next month, as you stated, Michael, to the asset strategy folks, we're going to move forward, as you said, which is to say to follow up and see where the investment policy is specifically, and also to consider voting on the recommendations they have made. And oh, there's the kitten again. All right. Oh, what a sweetie. Oh, okay, sorry. We're being cat bombed.
So, Michael, do you want to jump into the actuarial report? Or,
Yes,
oh,
John has a question.
John W.
Would it facilitate next month's discussion on these items if the ad hoc committee tackled them first?
I would appreciate that, yes. And I think the question that I asked about the recommendations lowering the risk, I was not particularly happy with their answer, that I felt like their recommendations should take that into consideration because we are very high risk on all of their charts.
Would you and your cat like to join the committee?
I may be able to do that this month.
I'm sorry.
Or just send your cat?
I sent her away. Yes, sorry about that.
Have to drop off for that to happen. So please, no.
But I defer to Michael Dunn on the committee idea.
I mean, I think the committee sounds great. I do want to be mindful that we make sure that we don't accidentally get a quorum on this committee.
Yeah.
So that would be a problem.
Judith says no, that's 4.
No, I mean,
Right.
you can't go to 4. But
Right.
if like one of us can't meet, I mean.
I'm happy to serve as an alternate, but I'm also traveling a lot in the next month, so I don't want to really commit to anything.
I
Thank you,
think
John.
we could
How about we see about keeping you in the loop in absentia?
on emails.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I would definitely, I want us to make sure that the board is receiving information over emails so that people can make informed decisions and votes next month. So, okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Michael Blackwell.
Yes, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the actuarial report. And you have that in your packet. This happens annually, and you can see where the fund is, and the summary is on page 4. You can see that as of the end of fiscal year 23, June 30th, 2023, we were at $1,309,539 in the fund, and the total OPEB liability is $3,086,979. So we are 42.42% funded moving forward.
I have a tangentially related question that I wasn't sure to ask now or later. Has there been any progress on the pursuing a grant for updating the Lexi HVAC?
No, that would have to be a state capital grant fund, and we would need to match that at 50%. So we do not have funding set aside for this until fiscal year 28, when the county has $3.5 million. we did try to get a solar power grant for the library and unfortunately did not succeed in that. But as I believe I told you last month, the county is looking at some potential solar projects and 2 of our libraries could be included in that.
Okay, so those are the only options that exist right now.
Well, the county owns the building. The only ready capital fund I have is the state library's capital fund. And as I say, we've got to do a 50% match for that. I don't know of anybody else who, especially since the county owns the building, and not us, would be a source of grant for that.
Okay, I'm just thinking, I'm looking at it, and since the utilities are so high there, that might be a way that we can start to plan to put more into OPEB if we're paying out less in
I'm
utility.
glad you brought that up actually, because we did talk with SMECO. And SMECO has done an energy analysis of all 3 libraries. And they have made several specific recommendations to the county, including changing the timing of the set points so that the building would more quickly have the HVA system close out and would more quickly in the morning have it start up again. And those are in the hands of the county who control that. So we're very grateful for SMECO for that reach out. And we think that that will probably be helping. So I'm sorry if I haven't shared that email with you. I intended to, but those recommendations, as I say, came from all 3 branches and from SMECO. So that might help. And I will share that email with you. And I'm sorry if I have not done so.
Anything else on the actuarial report that we should discuss?
Can I
John?
ask a question about page 12, please?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, so according to this, if we look under 2023 contributions in relation to the actuarially determined contribution, contributions are showing in this report as 92,966. In that fiscal year, how did we get $92,000 into the OPEB if we're paying it out of operating expenses?
Well, so we have a listing of all the money that we paid out of pocket. We also know how much the total amount was, and there are people who are involved with this do have to put up some money on their own. So my sense is that this is the amount of money that we put towards paying out of pocket those expenses for the healthcare costs for that year. And that's in fact what that listing says, and we can share that document with you as to how much we paid. And it also lists how much the people who are benefiting paid. So I think that's probably what that is. That's not money we put into the OPEB though.
Belinda, did you want to add anything? I'm sorry, I couldn't tell if Belinda wanted to jump in or not.
I do, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the exact amount we put out of pocket for retiree contributions. The OPEB, that Bolton report does that number from us and puts it in the report. I don't have the report in front of me, but that would be my guess is what that line is.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it corresponds exactly with how much money we paid out of pocket for for the fund, as I just said. So I will share that report with you. I have it. And that's the money that we paid, as it were. We didn't put it into the investments, though.
Well, even allowing for
And
that,
the-
go ahead.
I'm sorry, it should equal the number on that FY23 budget under health insurance of the OPEB insurance.
Which
I noticed-
which was an operating expense in that budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
It
And
does
not-
equal that number.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's our out-of-pocket expenses. That's what we paid for the year into pay for that benefit. So, looking at what the liability is, let's assume that these investments that we have now at 1.3 million would bring in $92,000 a year. We could already say that it's funded. I mean, it really is. The purpose of this is ultimately to pay for the costs of that health insurance
For retirees.
for retirees, yes.
And I think I read somewhere that if you're a 30-year retiree, the OPEB is going to pick up 85% of
That
your
is
costs.
correct.
And
Yes.
if you're a
85%,
20-year, it's a lesser percentage.
yes, it is, and it goes down to 10 years, I believe. So depending how long you've been with the library, you could be paying 15, the library might pay 15 and you pay 85, or it might, for long-term retirees, go the opposite way. Yes, Judith?
Belinda, so on that same chart that we're talking about, on 22, it's 143,000. That's like a real aberration that year. What, did something happen in 22 to make it so high?
I'm sorry, what chart?
Okay, so we're talking about the OPEB, what we actually paid out from the operating costs. We actually paid out an OPEB 92,000. It's been around 100,000, except for in 22, when it was 143,000. If you don't have it to look at, it's all right.
No, it's okay. So we had a couple people pass away. So we lost a couple people that we no longer pay for. The insurance goes up every year. We also had, I believe in 21, 23 here on bill at that time. So to look at those
Belinda, you're
exact-
breaking up real bad. We can't understand you. So I think, Judith, could we kind of defer this conversation for the time being?
It could be an email answer also.
Okay.
Like, it's just an unusual year. Maybe you had a lot of retirees. That's fine. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Right.
We did have some very, very long-term retirements that year as well, and we'll have to check and see if that affected. We had somebody retire at 50 years, at 49 years, and at 47 years that year, and I don't know if that somehow affected it, but we will get you an answer to that, but that is what that amount is.
Great. All right. Can we move on from here? Thank you.
Yes, in that case, we're going to move into the action items. And a document that Sharon was referring to earlier in chat called 4B. This is the budget transfers where we had surplus amounts, where we had negative amounts, and the change from the one budget set of budget lines to the other set of budget lines. And I'd like you to vote for that. It comes out to a zero sum. I mean, there's no profit, there's no loss. It's just moving money around, really. But if you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask.
Any questions, or we can entertain a motion to approve this budget amendment?
That's an internal reallocation line by line, correct?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
I move to approve.
Second.
Sharon. Thank you, John Jay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? No.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The other action item we request is a website privacy policy. Let me give you the why of that. And that is in your packet, and it has some red that are changes and some crossouts. We formerly used Google Analytics in order to track what happened with our visits to our website. And we've stopped using Google Analytics and are using a less expensive. So that's the reason for the changes, is that the new system tracks things a bit differently. But we also are staying very close to the intention of the policy, which is to protect privacy of anybody visiting the site. So everything is anonymized. We do not track information about individuals. So we know, for example, IP addresses that visited the library's website, but we don't know whose website that is. We don't track anybody coming to our website. We know what type of web browser visitors to our website use, but we don't know who they are. We just know, hey, somebody logged in using Chrome. We know how many times individual pages were accessed. So you can basically see that because there's changes in the system we're using to track, that we're changing little things, but the overall aim again is to guarantee privacy of the people who are working with the library in accordance with Maryland law. So I ask that you please consider approving this policy, but any questions?
Yeah, I think about 3 questions. One is, this policy would apply only to our main website, and it wouldn't apply to Cosmos, which I believe has its own private privacy policy.
That's correct. This is our website.
All right. And
but Smyrna will have something similar in place.
yes, yeah, I was looking over it a few minutes ago. And we don't track types of devices that people use, whether it's a desktop or tablet or phone.
That's practically impossible to do because things show up as an IP address, and we don't know what IP address necessarily would be. So I'm going to say that we don't really look at the type of device.
I can speak to that a little bit too. This is Sarah. We do actually have a little bit of data on that. It just based on screen resolution, we can see if it was a tablet or a desktop. The key thing that's different about what we're using now versus Google Analytics is that we're not linking any of that information. So our web server retains a list of IP addresses, but we don't have those IP addresses visited these pages. We just have a list of IP addresses. There's a list of pages. There's a list of files downloaded, but there's no linking them together.
It's all anonymized, yes.
That's what I've seen from Google Analytics. They have like sometimes you'll have Safari for an Apple, a portable Apple device versus a Mac.
And you can get a lot of that from the browser version.
Yes. And I think my final question is, although the European Union rules on cookies don't really apply, I've seen a lot of sites that they serve multiple countries. They follow the European Union rules, when you'll see the pop-up that says accept or don't accept cookies. So it wouldn't apply to us, since we don't actively seek patrons outside of Southern Maryland or St. Mary's County.
Right. Technically, it doesn't. But I will say that the new system that we're using, called Simple Analytics, is a small company located now I can't remember. It's either Denmark or Norway, I think. Their product is GDPR compliant, so it actually does not use cookies to track. So we are not setting cookies to track website visitors.
That's good to know.
I'm glad to hear that that we're separating the IP addresses from the other data, because IP addresses are often specific unless you're using a VPN to a particular computer. So that might be something to call out in this policy, that the IP address is not traced to the other data.
Yeah, I think that was where I had tried to say that we don't track or permanently record information about individuals and their specific visits, but we can also modify that a little bit to spell it out. The simple analytics actually doesn't track IP at all. I kept IP in the privacy policy because our web server actually does. It's running Apache, and so there's a stats program in there that just logs, just the visitor logs. So we technically have that data, but it's not actually in the analytics software that we're using.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And that actually, I saw that you tried to include that, but to me, it was just more confusing because I was trying to figure out how you were not recording information on an individual's visit while you were still recording that data. So, agreed.
Sharon and Sarah, could we do a little wordsmithing to make an amendment to this document so that we can approve it as amended today, perhaps? Do we know what we want to add or change?
I think perhaps even a parenthetical statement after IP addresses that visited the library's website saying this data is anonymized and not tied to other data collected would probably solve the question.
Okay.
This data is anonymized and not tied to other data collected.
If everybody's good with that, may I then, yes, Judith.
One more question. So the other day I logged in to reserve a conference room on your website, which worked very well, but I had to put in my library card number. You're saying that you are not keeping that information, and that was just me reserving a conference room. Anytime you have to put in your library card number, you're not recording or keeping that information. And I'm just saying it's really clear that we need to be really clear that we're saying we're not doing something, that we're absolutely not keeping track of people that are logging in with their library card number.
So that is a little bit of a tricky issue. First of all, I do want to say that you don't actually have to log in with your library card number to reserve a conference room. Unfortunately, the way that our platform is set up, and I have asked for this to be adjusted, and it's kind of on the maybe future list. The library card number and PIN is at the top. And if you put it in and hit find details, it will fill your information from your library card, but it is not a requirement. You can leave it blank and just fill in your own information, and it will reserve the room for you. So it's not a requirement, but it looks like it's a requirement because it's at the top. The other part of that is that page is not technically our website. That is our third-party platform. And I'm trying to remember if they have a public privacy policy. If not, I'll look into it and see if we can get that added in. But yeah, that is information that we have separate from our website.
But in any circumstances that I want to log in and I'm using my library card number, that information isn't recorded and kept?
Yes, and that part in our privacy policy, actually, outside of the website portion, there's under the confidentiality of library records. We do have a section that says that it applies to all information submitted to the library via any communication mechanism, and that list of personal information that might be collected does include library card number, and it goes over the ways that we use this information. Can put that link in chat too, just so that to the full privacy policy.
I should point out, Judith, that Maryland law requires strict confidentiality, and that record is not available to the public and cannot be accessed via a request for Freedom of Information Act. It could be subpoenaed by law enforcement, but even then it is within my purview as director to say yes or no to that request. So Maryland law is very strict about the confidentiality of library records. So if you, for example, ever sent me an email, hey, Michael, what do you think about this book I just checked out of the library? That could not be discoverable.
Okay, but that's let's be really clear. We're saying here, you're saying you have the information. I don't know that you're saying we do not.
To our website.
I mean, if we say we do not track, that means we never track or permanently record, I don't know what permanent is, information about individuals and their specific visits.
But I think there's a difference.
The website, that is true.
On the website.
Simply a physical website, that is true, yes. Now, if you log into our specific site, we have a different policy for that. You know, if you're going to use the library catalog, you may have, by choice, save your own history of what you've done there. If you don't do that, we don't have that information. We don't keep that, but you can opt to. Yes, there's a different, Sharon, to answer your question in the chat, there's a different privacy policy of the website versus our library services.
Okay, so this might help clarify. After you say website visits, put in parens the website, what we're talking about. You're talking about the SMC, was it P, Public Library System, or LIB?
It's stmalib.org.
Yeah,
and I
no,
agree.
right.
That's what I was going to suggest as
Is
well.
that what you're, if that's what you're talking about, maybe put that in. This, we're talking about only this website.
Yeah, Laura, can you expand on that, on kind of the edit you're thinking to identify the website as Judith is saying?
Yeah, so I think where I would say even in the heading where it just says website, we just add parentheses www.stmalib.org, because I agree, we know because we're using all of these services, but Sharon's comment in the chat is exactly what this is. We have multiple vendors and they all have privacy policies that we are aware of and we're very careful with, and there's the confidentiality, but we do link and track and use internally the library card data. So like it is not public, it will never be shared publicly, but for instance, the library can use that to say, oh, people use the meeting room this many times. And it's not necessarily anonymized in the way that this policy about our website is saying we anonymize the data. And so we're very careful about sharing it with the public because of all the laws and all of that. But it is something that we, like me as a library staff person, for example, Orange Boy that I showed you at the last meeting is library card data. It's what, you know, where people live and what they're doing. And we use that for marketing purposes, but it's very carefully controlled as far as privacy publicly. And we are extremely careful about that. But I do think adding the actual web address is a great idea, Judith, and I think it should help clarify that.
I would also suggest adding a line at the bottom, perhaps, to say, like, please note that library services managed by other vendors have separate privacy policies.
So we do actually, underneath in the full privacy policy, under the website section, under digital branch privacy is a third-party digital services, which is, it says in order to use our third-party digital services like the catalog and online resources, you log in to validate yourself as a library customer. And then it talks about what data those services might be collecting. And then within that, we say, when you are using digital content from third-party vendors, we cannot guarantee that our privacy policies or Maryland confidentiality laws apply. We recommend that you check the privacy policy of the company. And then we have a list of links to privacy policies for all of the different vendors that we have them available for.
Okay, great. So right now we are looking at the revision and we have two amendments to it. We have that to the first bullet about the IP data being anonymized and not tied to other data collected. And second, we have identifying the website specifically in the header in a parenthetical.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? And thank you for those. We really appreciate your efforts to help clarify this policy. Yes,
John W.
The fact that we even have, when you start out, the insert your library card number here, does that mean a person has to be a library patron to use a room?
Well, no, Sharon's addressed that question in the chat. You're still going to have to put some information in. We need to be able to contact you if you're going to use a meeting room. For example, let's say the library springs a leak, as has happened, or the air conditioner fails, as has happened, and we need to close the library. We need to be able to contact you and say, please don't come to use your meeting room because the library is closed. And anytime we have a closure, we do that.
I understand all that, but it seems to me, based on the beginning of the discussion and all the way through, that little tag about insert your library number is irrelevant. If I was looking at that and I said, well, shoot, I don't have a library card, I'm dead in the water. Don't even try.
We have had people email us about that. Unfortunately, we are not able to edit the page either to make it very clear that it's optional. It doesn't have the red asterisk next to it, which is indicating that it is optional. It is optional. So, if people email and ask, we always tell them, no, just leave it blank and, input your information. And I've put it on, and I'm looking at it now on our reserving a meeting room page, the page we actually have control over. I will make it a little more clear on there too, that it is optional to put that library card number in.
So who controls the editing of that page?
That's our third party. Communico is the platform that we use for
Okay.
events and meeting rooms.
I would suggest that you get a hold of them and tell them we want that off of there.
Yeah, we have. I mean, they look at it, they call it an enhancement request. And I know that other libraries have asked them for that as well. But we don't control their product development schedule, unfortunately.
We control
but I can certainly.
And do you know what happens when you make an amendment request? They ask for
nothing.
Oh, they ask for money. Will you help for you really often you can have something done custom, but you have to pay. So
are we ready to entertain a motion to approve this website policy language with the 2 amendments that we have discussed?
I make a motion.
Yep.
All right.
I move that we adopt the website privacy policy with the 2 amendments as outlined.
Second.
Thank you, John and Sharon. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? All right, motion passes.
Michael, while we're on the subject of policy amendments, may I ask a question about a different policy?
Sure, let's call this new business. Go ahead.
All right. Want me to wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay. How old do you have to be to reserve a study room?
What do you mean, how low?
How old?
Oh, how old?
Mhm.
It doesn't, the website doesn't have a name, have an age limit.
I think our policy does.
The booking terms and conditions,
Yeah, the policy is 12.
you must be accompanied by an adult if you're under 12.
Well, didn't we amend it to a higher number?
no,
I believe we amended it to 16.
I have no memory of changing that policy for reserving meeting rooms at all.
So 12 if accompanied by an adult.
Yes.
All right. Is the adult making the reservation?
It doesn't say, but according to national law, you have to be 13 to have your own email address.
Yeah, you have to be 18 to enter a contract too. So who's making the reservation, the adult or the 12-year-old? Just asking.
I don't know if the matter has ever come up. And in Maryland, certainly somebody over the age of 16 would have.
16 is for the age of having sex. It has nothing to do with entering into a contract.
Well,
Is there a contract involved with reserving a meeting room?
Well, there are certain stipulations about your behavior when you're in there. For me, that's a contract. You agree to that and we agree to let you have the room.
What's going to be a problem if a 13-year-old reserves a meeting room?
I'm sorry, you're all fuzzy. What'd you say?
Well, I'm not understanding what you're getting at. You know, if we have a Boy Scout who's 13 who wants to reserve a meeting room, I don't see it's a problem.
I'm just asking, who's making the reservation, a 13-year-old or their parent?
The card holder.
Okay, so anyone over the age of 12 with a library card can make a reservation for a room.
Anyone over the age of 12, they don't have to have a library card.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they have to agree to our rules about cleaning it up and not defacing it and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
And John, your concern is that that's a contract that they're too young to enter into?
Yeah,
I strongly disagree.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think this is a
I-
problem.
well, I'll just leave it on the table.
Okay, well, thank you for raising it. Any other items on new business that we should discuss? John Jay.
Wanted to get an update on the unwelcome visitors that accompanied the books in a couple of branches. Is that a typical phenomenon where insects hitchhike on books?
sorry, could you say that again?
Is that typical? Does that happen fairly often where books will arrive with insects?
Oh, no, that's the first time that has happened in years and years. I was rather surprised that it happened so close together. We checked, so the last person who returns an item in, we know who that is. So those were not the same, it was not the same person. So the procedure when this happens is that we communicate with the person who returned the materials. And they have to provide proof that they have addressed that issue before we allow them to check out more. But that's a very rare thing. It has not happened in 7 years that we identify pests in return materials. It has happened in a couple other libraries. But we tend to be very upfront about it, and we handle it the same way that that most other Maryland libraries do. And it's sort of like, all right, we've isolated them. We know we don't have a problem, but we're going to, out of all due caution, close the branch and fumigate. But very rare, and I'm so rare that when it happened twice within a weekend, what the heck is going on here? Yeah.
Recent high temperatures, maybe?
No, that's a good question, and no, it is a very rare occurrence.
Sharon.
I have two things that are new business. The first is I was recently alerted to the fact that approximately 25% of voting adults in the US are illiterate, functionally illiterate. That is a very high percentage, and our county follows that. And so I would like to, in the future, I'm doing my own research and kind of looking into it, but I'd like to start to talk about how, as a library, we are addressing that and can continue to address that. I know we've done a lot of things in that area, but specifically talking about how to reach illiterate adults, because they aren't always inside the scope of library services. We have to pursue them in a sense.
The Literacy Council has its office at Lexington Park Library, and that's a close partnership. But so we will happily, however, think about ways to reach them. The trouble is that if they're not functionally literate, visits to the library are probably not going to be a high priority. So it's a kind of an issue with a lot of things at the library. How do we reach the people who are not coming to see us? And that's one reason to have the mobile library, where often, even if it's visits aimed at children, we'll be out there in the community, and so reaching adults who may also not be. But another way I definitely know we do it is that the adult literacy tutors use our meeting rooms. I'm sorry, our study rooms mostly. So I know one woman in particular who does quite a bit of this, and was greatly inconvenienced by COVID when we couldn't have access to that. But now that all the meeting and study rooms are sort of back in full service, is using them for that again. You have to have kind of an anonymous place when someone's meeting, a tutor's meeting with somebody, so that somebody look and say, oh, what's going on with you? Can't you read? So it's a real challenge, but I'm happy to talk about ways we can try.
And if I may, Michael, the Literacy Council and both the library as well, we're both part of the Health Hub partnership. And that is because we're reaching out through Health Matters, we are reaching more adults who need that extra assistance with education. And so Literacy Council is very busy finding tutors for the new influx of students that they're receiving.
Question for Sharon. Sharon, does your 25% number, does that include people who don't read anything at all or just don't read English, which is the predominant language?
So the survey, and it's hard to get these statistics because they're different in multiple places, but the survey was saying that 27% of US adults who are of voting age cannot read well enough to complete a form in English. And then additionally, it's up to like 57 or 58% don't read at a 7th grade level. So it's quite substantial, this problem. And I think that sets up people to not be informed about a lot of issues. So there's a lot of fallout from that. I'm glad to hear that the library is so well connected with the Health Hub. I think that's a huge in for that. And the mobile library, absolutely agree. You can talk to a lot of people through their kids, and I think those are all good paths forward. But I may be bringing additional information about other options or possibilities that are working across other libraries.
Please do. We obviously welcome input like that, and we'll see what we can do. So when the mobile library goes, for example, to the St. Mary's Caring, often we're reaching adults who maybe struggle with literacy. We know that there's even a language barrier there that we're helping to address. So it's literacy is our fundamental mission, and we will do everything we can to try to fulfill that mission well.
Judith.
Along those lines, I think, Sharon, you mentioned are not functionally literate in English. And so certainly in this county, we have a large number of non-English speaking residents, a large number, mostly Hispanic. And so my observations in the library is, and my recommendation is that we seriously start going bilingual. Everything from the signage when you walk in to go bilingual. We have a signage, directions, possibly the webpage, when you're getting a library card, when you're trying to check out a book, to have that Spanish, English choice.
Funny you mentioned that about the website. So
now signage is fairly easy to do and pretty cost effective. I realize changing a website may have cost, but that might be something that we could look into this year and project out to make our website, and more importantly, where you check out the books, bilingual.
Sarah, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. We recently added an accessibility inclusivity toolbar to our website called Recite Me. And that does have translation into over 100 languages, as well as text to speech in over 30, I believe, including Spanish, as well as some other inclusivity features. People can change the font size, the color, lots of different options there. And I do know that Smyrla was trialing that for Cosmos as well. I don't know where they are in that discussion, but right now it is just our website. So again, just that stmailib.org, but they were looking at adding that for the Cosmos catalog as well.
Do we have any data that indicates any of our employees may be bilingual in some other language, Spanish or whatever?
Yes, we do. And yes, some
are they identified on their name tag or with a little national flag of that language?
No, but we call on them as needed, and we can call across libraries to have a phone conversation to help with that.
I would suggest that since their presence is public facing, that they be publicly identified as being bilingual.
We are also working, Judith, on creating more Spanish translations of things like our fee schedule for book checkouts and different, informational pieces, so that we have that ready to go. We're working with our One of our mobile outreach librarians is Spanish bilingual. She speaks English and Spanish and is totally fluent. So she's doing a lot of those translations for us, and that is wonderful. So we are working on that. The other language we're starting to see a lot of is actually Vietnamese. We do not currently have any staff who speak Vietnamese, so that one's a little bit out of reach right now, but we are working on the Spanish translations.
Could we, in our hiring process, give preference to people with extra
We already do.
language skills?
We already do.
Okay.
All things being equal in a hiring decision, that is something that is considered, yes. And we are actively hoping to increase that. The issue is who applies for the job, of course. And often somebody who may not have English skills may feel, or good English skills may feel discouraged from applying for a library job. But it is something that we absolutely include in the hiring process, and is often a deciding factor when we have Spanish.
Right.
Very, very useful skill.
Sharon, was there another topic you wanted to raise?
Yes, it has to do with the strategic plan going out as the RFP. I wanted to tie those two things together and make sure that the literacy issue was part of the strategic plan or was a consideration factor in the RFPs that come back to us, so that everybody was aware of that. But I didn't see the strategic plan on the agenda, so I didn't know what its status was or how we were moving forward with it.
Well, I've never been asked to include you in an RFP before, other than to approve it. So you've seen the RFP. So the process is going to be, there's a nonprofit RFP site where I will post that. I will also be sending it out to any number of vendors who have successfully completed strategic plans in Maryland, other Maryland libraries. So we're trying to get it to as large an audience as possible. I am the co-chair of the American Library Association Architecture for Public Libraries Committee. And often architects will be ones who will also do strategic planning. So through that group, I have connections nationally with a lot of firms who do this. My concern about it, and you sent me an email question, was, is the grant for 20,000? And we told you last month that yes, the grant for 20,000. I raised it 25 just because we're asking in that RFP for a firm to do more than a lot of these people will do. Often they give you the process and you've got to do the work. We want a report prepared that will be kind of a bit more work than is maybe typically done by some of these vendors. But we are looking for somebody who's going to give us a great process for doing that, who to communicate with. Often library staff then get involved with doing this, and we are going to form a team. And you will be asked perhaps to participate as well. For example, would you, and I'm not asking you personally, Sharon, I'm asking board members as a whole, be willing, when we give you a series of questions, to send an email to one of our commissioners and say, would you please talk with me for 15 or 20 minutes, and I have questions. I will send you the questions ahead of time, but we will be soliciting feedback from important community members, including elected officials. So that's one thing that I'm kind of hoping that some of you would be willing to do, is to
yeah, of course,
contribute to the strategic planning process and do community reach outs. And
yeah, the board members should be represented on any kind of committees that are forming to engage in this process.
So, for example, if there's other people you would definitely like to see, and we'll be preparing a list of people that we're going to be reaching out to. If you wish to contribute to that list, we definitely need to talk to this person or whatever. Then we will be making sure that you are included in this whole process. So it really is just, first, let's get the word out. You will be asked to select or help select between the people who reply. And so that's where the first step where you will be involved. But we are going to be forming a team, and this will be a multi-month process.
Perfect. Thank you. That's the kind of
And
feedback I was
Michael
looking for.
and Tressa, you were involved the last time. We did this. So yeah.
John W.
I have two concerns about this document. First of all, was the short fuse nature of it. It seems to me that we could have been included a little bit earlier in some of the wording or the concept of what you want to do. Secondly, I noticed where you want to drop it, hopefully for maximum result, but I still think it needs to go on and should go on the eMaryland Marketplace, which has a category specifically designed for RFPs of this dollar magnitude here.
Well, if you want to send me a link to that, please do, and I will make sure that it is included. And first of all, we only got notice of the grant. And second, I'm going to argue that this is operational and in my purview and does not require your direct oversight to do an RFP. Thank you.
Well, here's another concern I have. A few years ago, we paid for a document or for a work order kind of like this, and obviously COVID threw it off the rails. There were things that we wanted to discuss, implement, etc., but COVID basically precluded that, and that's referenced in your document here. So I guess my concern is, why do we not start with that document to see what's left over that we can be working on before we go spending another $20,000 to $25,000 to reinvent something that may include those unresponded actions from the last one?
Well, I'm going to argue the strategic plan is usually general enough that it is transferable, and we'll certainly be looking at the previous one. For example, the mission statement, the vision statement, we'll be looking at that. Does that need to be redone? But if you're asking why do this process, well, A, we got a grant to do it and to have consultant help. And B, I think it's good to take a fresh look with a consultant who's going to bring in something that we may not have time to talk about today, which is, for example, that Maryland trend report that I gave you. This consultant should be expert in things like that. Helping us take a fresh look is never a bad idea. And there are people who do this professionally. I'd like to get their insight.
I agree with Michael that I do think this RFP is, you know, an operational action that would not require board oversight. I think at this point we are planning for the planning, and you know, I know that we will all be deeply involved in the actual strategic planning process. So we'll catch that wave when it gets to us. Michael Blackwell, do we need to go into closed session today?
I would like to give you an update, but there is no legal reason, meaning that the library is not currently involved in any legal actions.
Okay, so
I'd like to give you a quick update, yes.
okay. All right. So I guess we're going to move into closed session. I think before we do so, I just want to note that our next meeting is on September 8th at Lexington Park, according to the agenda at 9:30. And dates to remember, the Library Foundation is hosting a fundraiser at the Rex on September 7th, and we're hosting one at Leonardtown Library on November 10th. And before we take action.
Could you say this again real quick? Can you say that again real quick? There's other two dates.
Sure. September 7th at the Rex in Leonardtown and November 10th in Leonardtown Library.
Okay, thanks.
So for the one at the Rex, just come on out, even takeout. So what happens there is that we get a certain portion of the proceeds for the evening. And thank you so very much to Joe and the Rex. No, the Rex will open at 4 o'clock that day. So 4 o'clock to closing, and please come on out. And as I say, it can even like a carry-out order. We'll get a portion of that for the library, and we're deeply grateful to the Rex. We are hoping to have a raffle that evening as well. And Mary Lee Russell, former library employee, is getting together that package. The one in November would be at Leonardtown Library, where this is the foundation planning that. And we are going to be working with Historic St. Mary's City to bring in their CEO, who will be presenting on quite a few things that have recently happened in terms of architectural findings. We will probably, this one really is very much still in the planning stages, but our previous fundraisers involved bringing in food and beverages, even with an alcohol license for wine. But at this one, it might be a little bit different. I'm hoping that we can have a story time, and obviously we'll be very careful. And maybe a scavenger hunt where kids will find like architecture, or, find things in the stacks.
Yeah, we're working on the planning. It'll have family activities, activities for adults, lots of good stuff.
Exactly. So we're really kind of hoping to re-engage the foundation. I'd say COVID hit the foundation kind of hard, and get back on the map a little bit. We've still got a lot of donations coming into the foundation, and obviously that's great, but getting back to the first fundraiser we've had as a group since before the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
I have a question.
Yes,
Hi, Dorothy.
November 10th, will that interfere with any Veterans Day events that you know of?
Veterans Day is the next day, so no, I'm kind of hoping that because that's the evening before, and we have the state's largest Veteran Day parade the next day, which the library does participate in, that it will mean people have the 10th off, and they might be more willing to come out to a fundraiser, but the library will be open that day. But Veterans Day itself will be the 11th on Saturday.
Let's see. So we need to do a motion to move into closed session. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, you do. You have to vote to close the meeting, and I need to record the time.
Right. Before we do so, I just want to note how much I appreciate and value the opportunity to have these conversations as a board. I feel like we have a really challenging slate of issues in front of us right now, and these are not easy decisions or conversations. And I just want to say how appreciative I am of everyone's commitment to the board, everyone's commitment to the well-being and the strength and sustainability of the library. I know we all have that in common, and we all bring very different perspectives and areas of expertise to the table. And I'm very thankful and appreciative that we can talk with one another and listen and learn from one another as we try to move the library in the best direction we can. So I appreciate the chance to work with all of you.
It is for me to thank all of you, including Michael, for your commitment to the library. Thank you so very much for all that you do and the wisdom you bring. The fact that you're unpaid is remarkable to me in some ways. You do so much work that I feel like you should be compensated, but I know that doing well for the library is great compensation for you. So thank you so very much.
All right, can we entertain a motion to move to closed session?
Move we enter close, that we adjourn from open session and move into closed session for the purpose of receiving an update on legal issues.
Well said, John.
A
Thank
second.
you. Thank you, Dorothy.
I'm sorry. Who seconded?
Dorothy.
Dorothy, thank you, Dorothy.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Hands up. This has to be a roll call vote.
Aye.
Oh, roll call vote. Okay, let's see. Judith.
Aye.
John J.
Aye.
Tressa.
Aye.
Dorothy.
Aye.
John W.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
All right, and I vote aye as well.
So no abstentions and none absent. We are closing under Section 8 to consult with staff consultants or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. And Michael, I will have to scan this to you to have it signed, but I will take care of that after the meeting. Could we make sure that YouTube is not on?
Yes,